Following Obi-Wan's mission to the planet of Kamino and his report to Jedi Masters Yoda and Mace Windu that a clone army had been ordered by Sifo Dyas at the request of the Republic Senate a decade earlier, Yoda would note that the Jedi Order's abilities must have been significantly affected if they couldn't see the development of the clone army on Kamino for so many years. Recognizing Yoda was correct, Mace would suggest that it might be time for the Jedi to inform the Senate that their ability to use the Force was diminished. But it must be asked, what exactly did Yoda and Mace mean when they referred to their abilities as being diminished? And why was the Jedi Order's use of the Force affected in this way by the time of the Prequel Trilogy? The timing that Mace would recognize that the Order's use of the Force was diminished is very telling. What we'll look at is the Jedi's inability to foresee the future, with the Force and its relative clarity that had once come rather easily for powerful Jedi like Yoda being clouded. It was the inability of the Jedi to foresee the creation of an army large enough to fight a galactic war that would finally cause Yoda and Mace to understand just how much their ability to use the Force had declined. As we'll see, the decline didn't appear suddenly, but was gradual over the course of decades. The best way to understand the decrease in the Jedi's ability to use the Force is provided by Yoda in the novel Labyrinth of Evil, with the Jedi Grandmaster explaining the difficulty he had in using the Force to find the answers he sought at the end of the Clone War. Unsurprisingly, it was the dark side that was the primary cause of his Force abilities receding. Whereas Yoda had once been able to surrender himself to the current of the Force to receive clear visions and wisdom, the current had gradually been interrupted over the decades prior to the Clone War, his visions replaced by swirlings of confusion, clouded in a way that created only more questions. Yoda had no doubt it was the dark side frustrating his efforts to see clearly, and which was diminishing his ability to use the Force, imagining himself drawing aside one veil only to find additional veils that needed to be pierced before he could see clearly, always just out of reach. This example was also used by Obi-Wan in the novel The Clone Wars Wild Space. During a mission he was undertaking with Senator Bail Organa at the start of the Clone War, he would accept it was the dark side that was clouding everything. As he would give himself over to the Force deeply to attempt to find clues that could help their mission, Obi-Wan hoped he could pierce the dark side's veil, using the same description as Yoda to describe the Jedi Order's diminished ability to use the Force. Therefore, when discussing the Jedi's ability to use the Force being diminished as introduced by Mace in Episode 2, what we're talking about is the dark side clouding the current of the Force the Jedi would use to find clarity in relation to the wisdom and answers they were searching for. This clarity was hidden by the veil of the dark side, and rather than negatively affecting the ability of the Jedi to draw upon the Force and use its power, it kept important details like Darth Sidious's true identity from the Jedi. Given the decrease in the Jedi's ability to use the Force was so importantly connected to the dark side, it's not surprising the overall decrease in this way was a consequence of the actions of the Sith. But it's much more direct than simply the fact the Sith and dark side were gaining in strength while the Jedi and light side were descending. Through Yoda's reveal in Episode 2 and in Labyrinth of Evil that the Sith knew of their weakness in this way, and that their weakened abilities was something gradual over the recent centuries, we know the reality the Jedi experienced by the Prequel Trilogy was the direct result of Darth Tenebris and his Sith Master, as well as Darth Plagueis and his apprentice Darth Sidious. What the Sith did to diminish the Jedi's ability to use the Force is explained in great detail within the novel Darth Plagueis, and described from the perspective of Plagueis himself. The most important action that would be the catalyst for creating the veil of the dark side that thwarted the Jedi by the Prequel Trilogy was performed by the Sith Master of Darth Tenebris. As explained by Plagueis, this Dark Lord of the Sith would open a small tear in the fabric of the Force, roughly 150 years before the Clone War. Plagueis saw this moment as the true commencement of the revenge of the Sith, as it allowed the Jedi to feel the presence of the dark side for the first time since Darth Bane, roughly 800 years earlier. Since this action, each Sith Lord who came after would work to enlarge that tear, so as to further the re-emergence of the dark side within the galaxy, to continue to expand the growth of the dark side's veil. Each Sith Lord did their part, but Darth Plagueis was uniquely dedicated to the growth of the dark side, attempting to shift the galaxy away from the light side as much as possible. Plagueis was confident the growth of the dark side was significant during his lifetime, recognizing a distinct shift in the climate of the galaxy where the light was shrinking and being forced to retreat by the power of the dark side. But most importantly, Plagueis and Sidious would succeed in tipping the balance completely to the dark side, roughly 2 decades before Mace Windu's reveal in Episode 2 that the Jedi had truly experienced a decrease in their ability to use the Force. After months of intense meditation, Plagueis and Sidious challenged the Force for sovereignty, succeeding as they brought their will to bear upon the Force. Plagueis recognized their efforts caused the Force to yield, gaining their desired result as the light side within the galaxy had dipped and the dark side had ascended. After this event, again still more than 10 years before Episode 2, Plagueis correctly predicted what Mace Windu would ultimately have to accept with Yoda, that while the ability of the Jedi to draw energy from the Force continued, their ability to use the Force diminished. In fact, Darth Plagueis would explain to his apprentice Sidious that because they were acting in accordance with the emergence of the dark side, Yoda and the other members of the Jedi High Council would attempt to look for answers through increased meditation sessions to try to gain insights about the future. However, Plagueis knew that through his efforts and the efforts of Tenebrous and his master, these powerful Jedi would only discover that the Force was clouded and unknowable, which would significantly benefit the Sith. In this way then, we know the direct efforts of Sith such as Darth Plagueis would cause the Jedi's abilities with the Force to become diminished by the time of the Prequel Trilogy. The Sith had successfully opened a tear in the fabric of the Force, unleashing the dark side upon the galaxy, and the efforts of Tenebrous, Plagueis, and Sidious only furthered this reality, increasing the dark side to such an extent that the galactic scales were undeniably tipped away from the light side. This would result in the Jedi having to fight through the veil of the dark side. While they would once be able to find wisdom through the current of the Force with clarity, this powerful reemergence of the dark side clouded that clarity, making the future and other answers they looked for unknowable. Because of these events and the growing veil of the dark side directly caused by the Sith, Mace Windu and Yoda would recognize that the abilities of the Jedi had become diminished, where by the Prequel Trilogy, they hadn't even been able to see that an entire clone army had been created for the Republic on Kamino. So there we have it, why the Jedi Order's ability to use the Force was diminished by the time of the Prequel Trilogy. Thank you very much to all of the Patreon members of Star Wars Reading Club, as your support is so greatly appreciated. You can find all of our social media links and a link to our Star Wars gaming channel in the description below for updates and even more Star Wars content. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. If not for me, for needing more Tenebrous canon lore.